In this country, black people from the very beginning have been seen as a monolith. And unfortunately, too many of us, especially the older generation, has viewed ourselves as a monolith. And that couldn't be the furthest thing from the truth. Because now I know some people might debate this, but race as we know it is, in fact, a social construct. And I'm separating that from this idea that gender is, because one, I don't believe that bullshit for the fucking life of me. But that's a social construct. I guess if it's a construct, I guess it's a construct made by the higher power or God, whatever you believe in. Because as far as human beings, we didn't make those choices. That we came out with a penis or a vagina. Okay? But anyway, one of the biggest problems in this country as far as being black is that you are labeled with a misnomer. Because, for one, people do not come from races, they come from tribes, they come from nations, they come from ethnicities. But unfortunately, because our history has originated from people that were disenfranchised Africans, me being one of them, we've only been splashed with the term black or Negro if you want to go further back. But as a whole, there are no groups in this country that have that. See, that's the whole point when people try to dismiss the uniqueness of the history of foundational black Americans in this country. Say whatever they want. Our experience here is unique to this country out of any other group. Okay? One, because we're not immigrants, we came here as prisoners. So there's a big difference there, despite what people want to tell you. First of all, when you come here as an immigrant, you come here voluntarily. Number two, you come with an intact family when you come to the country. Okay? So we can't just ignore that and say, well, it doesn't make a difference. It does make a difference. It totally makes a difference. It makes a difference in how your culture interacts with the dominant society, how it interacts with other cultures. It definitely makes a difference, despite what some people don't want it to because they like to just sweep on a rug. But usually, the people that want to sweep on a rug are the ones who don't want something tarnishing their sense of historical grandeur, because they just want to ignore the shame and concentrate on the glory. But see, that's not real history. Real history comes with both sides. And the reality of it is, being black in this country is actually an injustice to just be referred to as black. And the reason why, as of recently, people have come to the conclusion that, a lot of great things have said, no, we have to have something that self-identifies. And in order to truly be free, when people say that we're freed in 1865, whatever the case may be, you have to be freed mentally just as well as physically, meaning that you have to define yourself as a group. And if you're defined by other groups or the dominant society, then you still are, in a certain sense, in a level of slavery. Because if someone else gets to define you, then you don't own yourself. That's just a reality. And fuck who don't like it. Okay? Ones that don't like it generally don't like it because they don't want to know the truth, because they want to sit in their bubble and say we're great and there's nothing wrong with us, or there's nothing wrong with anything in our culture. Yeah, guess what? There's pathologies in every culture, including yours or anybody who's listening, whether you're part of dominant society or not. Being dominant does not exempt you from having flaws and engaging in iniquities, okay? It's just a matter of time that overall those pathologies will ultimately exacerbate into the culture and consume the culture. That's what's happening now in this country. That's why you have we're below replacement birth rates in this country. Because contrary to what we want to say here, there are things in this culture that ultimately create an environment that it will consume itself. And that's exactly what's happening right now. See, as far as being a foundation Black American, the reason why you can't just be Black in the country is because we can't address our own real issues by putting ourselves in with everybody else. It's nothing personal. We can't say because someone's got the same skin color as us, they're the same. You can't say that about people in the Caribbeans. You can't say about whether they be Jamaican, Haitian, Dominican, Puerto Rican. Nope. They are still not the same as us. That's just a reality. It has nothing to do with racism. It has to do with fact. They come from different cultural experiences, and those experiences have to be respected, but they're respecting every other group. Hell, some people from religious connection, they get to have their experiences respected even well after the fact of the things that may have happened to them where they were persecuted and hell, put in prisons, put in concentration camps, things like that. But guess what? They are allowed to not forget their past. But for some reason, when it comes to foundation Black Americans or descendants of American slaves, there's always the narrative that, oh, we need to forget about slavery. I mean, hell, let's just be real. You can have Michelle Obama up on a thing sitting there saying that. These are people who are supposed to be Black saying it. And that doesn't make them right just because they're Black saying it. Because what you're basically saying is, let's just see, we can't escape slavery because it's part of our history in that regard. It's still part of history. We can't get away from that. We are foundational Black Americans. Our bloods come from the killing fields of the South, and that's just a reality. And the fact of the matter is, nothing's going to make that go away. Not talking about it is going to make that go away. It's in your lineage like anything else. You need to acknowledge it. Doesn't mean that you have to define your entire life, but it definitely means you need to acknowledge where you came from to know where you're going and knowing how to get to the next step. And for people to ask Black Americans to do that, that is the racism in itself. And the idea that we should just call ourselves Americans when literally no other group in this country does that. There can be French, they can be of French descent, they can be of Italian descent. They still call themselves Italians even though they're born in America, right? Even though they're not technically national Italians, but they see themselves as an ethnic group derived from the country of Italy, right? The reason why we don't have the benefit of that is because of being disenfranchised Africans and having our culture, most of our culture stripped from us, our language, our God, and things like that, and being renamed. That's a reality. And the fact of the matter is, based on those experiences, we need to define ourselves based on our experience. No one else can do that but us. No one has the right to do that but us. Okay? So at the end of the day, you are still not Haitian, Jamaican. And that's another thing too about the whole term of Black, quote unquote. Most Black immigrants, if you want to use the term Black, don't even sell themselves Black when they come to the country. Matter of fact, the actress that was in 12 Years a Slave, Lupita Nyong'o, she has said, Lupita Nyong'o, she said that she never knew that she was Black until she came into America, to the United States. So those people they call themselves Cameroonian, they call themselves Nigerian, they call themselves Liberian, they call themselves, from whatever African country they're from, they identified under that Senegalese, they identify themselves as the nation or tribe that they come from. Okay? They don't identify as a race. We're the only one that have been in a position to be identified as a race, and you know what? It gets used against us by the dominant society. Oh, we came up a group that was for white folks, we would be called racist. Well, maybe it's because of some of you folks actually bothered. Well, it's probably not completely their fault because this country has engaged in a lot of whitewash history from the very beginning. And the fact of the matter is, they're only calling themselves, most cases, these organizations are only referring to themselves as Black because they don't have anything else. But now we do. And now we do. And we've gone through a lot of different changes over years, okay? Trying to self-identify, being under identity crisis because of disenfranchisement and slavery. And then when somebody tells you, well, we're just American, know what they want to do is they want you to ignore your history for the benefit of self-aggrandizing their own. That's selfish, and it's also racist, even if they don't realize it. Because at the end of the day, everyone comes from a certain experience, and it should be respected by other groups and vice versa. But for the society to tell black people, shut up, forget about your history. You literally, when you tell black people to forget about slavery, you're literally telling them forget about your history. Imagine telling a Jewish person that. Just imagine telling a Jewish person the Holocaust was a long time ago. Forget about it. Get over it. Just imagine that. Imagine how that would go across. But for some reason, it seemed to be a-okay to tell this to Descendants of American Slaves, Foundation Black Americans. Because, we need to forget about that stuff. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You got all the basic insults and, things where, you're being told, well, what you need to do, all the authoritarian rhetoric that we got to cut, because everybody else knows what we need for us better than ourselves. Imagine telling Italian Americans that. Imagine telling Puerto Ricans that. Imagine telling any group in this country that, well, you have your own experience and issues that you want to deal with. We'll tell you how you should view your own history. Imagine that. It would not go over well at all. Matter of fact, it wouldn't go over. But for some reason, a lot of the culture in this country feels, for some reason, entitled to say this to black people. And unfortunately, a lot of black people, especially a lot of older black people, have gone along with this at the detriment of their own lineage, having to deal with things that they didn't address in the past, even for the things they did address. Still leaving some loose ends out there, and you know what? And that means it's up to us as further in the future generations to correct it, whether people like it or not. Because the reality of it is, we are not black. We may be black based on a social construct of race, but we are not only black, because you can't not group us in with every other person with a dark skin complexion and then call us all the same. We're not. Hell, we're not even viewed the same by actual Africans. We're not even viewed the same by other groups that come into this country that actually look down on a lot of us. Because they don't come from our experience. They have no knowledge of the history of this country. And when they learn it, most times they come here on a very basic level. Very basic level. So we need to have, if anything, we need to organize around being an ethnic group, because we are. We come from a specific experience in this country that's unique from any other country, because it wasn't in any other country. It was in this one. So please, all you other folks out here, miss me with the bullshit about what they've had in other countries. They can go deal with the problems of whatever injustice that they were susceptible to in their nations and their tribes. They can deal with their own problems like what we need to deal with ours. And the hypocrisy too is in this country is just funny about how we allow. See, this is what nobody can get away from. Let me tell you the main thing nobody can get away from. You never hear much about it. Is the fact that Native Americans, or the Native American Indian, which way you want to look at it, have a government in this country that recognize them as tribes. That literally, they may have to fight, but guess what? Usually, ultimately, they get recognized as tribes. Now, you won't hear this on mainstream media. If you go to some Native American news sources, you'll hear about it. You'll hear about, their quote unquote, what the benefits are of their federal recognition, okay? Because the reality of it is, being federally recognized here means that usually comes with some form of, whether they want to call it that, reparations. This Little Shell Indian tribe, back during the Trump administration, received $25 million from the United States government and about 2 to 4 acres of land. Okay? Now, I don't know if they're going to get $25 million every year, but the fact of the matter is that they got $25 million. Okay? They got $25 million. And if you see a picture of, the matter of fact, the leaders of this tribe, A few of them don't look like they got one drop of Native American blood in them. Not one. Matter of fact, one picture I seen of one of the tribe leaders of that tribe, they had a picture of him and he had his face tilted to the side like he didn't really want to get a full picture. So who knows? Maybe he's a descendant of $5 Indians. If you ever heard of that term, okay, look it up. What a $5 Indian is. It comes from I think it was called the DoAS roll back at the time, where people would bribe the people who were doing the rolls with $5 to put them on there, with actual white men be on that roll so they get those Native American Indian benefits. That's what was done. This is true American history. Part of it they don't talk about. Same way they don't talk about the Greenwood district of Tulsa, Oklahoma. You know, what was once called Black Wall Street, or Little Africa, in 1921 was the only, they never talk about this, was the only domestic mainland government attack on its own country. There were bombs actually dropped on the city. So a lot of these white supremacist KKK people who made up a lie, you know, as usual, they'll say some white woman got raped, some white family got killed. They did it to Native Americans too. That's how you got the Sand Creek Massacre. It's one way you got that, because somebody said that these Native Americans killed a white family, which probably was a lie. It was a white reverend who was the leader of this slaughter as well, by the way. But I digress. But anyway, you know, we got to be honest, okay? We got to look at the true aspects of the history, not just some of it, all of it. Because, you know, you'll have people tell you that you were never a slave. Okay, well, guess what? You're right. I was never a slave. I'm a descendant of slave, just like you're descendants of slave masters. But that doesn't mean, because you were never a slave owner, does not mean, one, that you don't benefit from the injustices that are committed for slavery, and does not mean that your group doesn't owe something. Because guess what? There were a lot of injustices done to black communities well after slavery. They don't talk about any of this stuff. What happened in Slocum, Texas? What happened in Rosewood? What happened in Black Wall Street? Many other places where there were functioning, successful black communities, and they didn't like it and they were destroyed. And there was no compensation for any of it. Matter of fact, just recently there was a couple of people that were still alive from the 1921 Black Wall Street Massacre. And this judge, this white lady, a judge, basically ignored when there was a conversation about it and just brushed it under the rug. And didn't even give an opinion as to why they shouldn't get anything. What does that tell you? I'm white and I say so. Right? So, the fact of the matter is, as a group, we need to have a group designation. Because every other group in this country has that, whether they be Irish, whatever. And they're Americans, but they're still Irish Americans. They still have context to their Americanism, but for some reason, black people shouldn't. Foundational black Americans shouldn't. We should just group ourselves with other groups that, hell, just because we're the same race don't mean they necessarily like each other. You can make that case with a lot of Latino groups that don't like each other, Asian groups that don't like each other. Okay? So why should black people be any different in that regard? There's still differences in culture that create communication barriers. And the fact of the matter is, we need to acknowledge, and anybody that says, oh, it doesn't matter, we're all American, those are people who just want to assimilate so bad that they don't acknowledge the fact, no matter how much ass kissing you do, how much sucking up you do, you're never going to be considered part of the dominant society. You're not. You're not. And you know what? Shouldn't try to. Try to work with everybody, sure, but don't try to be something you're not, just for the sake of appeasing some other people that you don't owe anything to appease. And the reality of it is, we need to make that a point when someone says, "Well, if I just met organized white," no, guess what? Let them know. Being a black American is not just about race. Knock it off. As a matter of fact, it has zero to do with race, if you want to be honest. It has to do with coming from a particular culture within the dominant society, or a culture within a culture, like you have any other group. Okay? They don't allow them to take your identity away. Don't allow anyone to tell you you don't have a right to identity, and as a group, we have a right to identity that we, as a consensus, agree on. And if you always got a few traitors in every group that want to say no because I don't want to piss off the dominant society. Well, they're cowards. We need to ignore them and stop letting them have a seat at the table. If they're that concerned, tell them to go somewhere else and let them see how they get treated. Okay? It's called self-preservation, not racism. We need to know our history. We always need to know our history like every other group. It's the only way, because just like they say, if you forget history, guess what? It's doomed to repeat itself. And it will. And hell, we still have things that happen now that happened 60 years ago. Maybe in small amounts, but still happens. Because guess what? Those sentiments are passed down from generation to generation. So you can't think that just because you don't have the same laws here don't mean the same mentality is not around. It's just like cancer. It may not be consuming, but it's still there. And if you let it grow long enough and you don't treat it, guess what? It's going to eventually consume you. And that's the thing, is that we need to understand that we have specific, yes, it's part of American history, but it's still our history individually as far as our group. Just like the Irish have a certain experience in this country, Germans have a certain experience in this country, the British descendants have a certain experience in this country, good or bad. But at the end of the day, we need to acknowledge those differences to actually realize how our place was set in the society from the day we were born, and how to navigate through society. People who tell you that's nonsense are assholes who don't want you, most cases, either they're ignorant or they don't want you to have an identity because it's easier to put you in a box so they can control you. No, well, guess what? If we're going to be in a box, we'll be in the box that we choose to be in, and you'll deal with that box, not the box you choose. And that's about respect as well. Because I sure as hell wouldn't go up to a Jewish person and tell them that you should just forget about your history. It don't matter now. All right? You should just not use Yiddish words because you're American, so you should only use English. I wouldn't dare do that. And it wouldn't be right if I did. It'd be quite disrespectful to the culture. So, guess what? There's an expression they say in the Bible, do unto others as you'll have them do unto you. And guess what? That includes foundational Black Americans too. You want respect, give us some too. Okay? Give us the same respect you want in return. And accept the identity that we choose and respect us for that identity. And don't try to scoff or mock it, because that means you're mocking us. And there's some people there in social media, I ain't going to name them right now, but they try to make a mockery of it. Some of these Black immigrant descendants that are on social media who have spent their time trying to make a mockery out of Black people and Black culture, and they want to put us all in this broad brush that because there's a few chicks out there being ratchet and twerking, that's part of our culture. Excuse me, I reject that. I am diametrically opposed to accepting any responsibility for other people's bad behavior, because guess what? White people wouldn't want to be blamed for everything the KKK and what the Nazis have done, now would they? Yeah, think about it. So anyway, I could talk for a lot longer about this subject, but I'm sure I'll be coming across it again. But as a whole, we have to stop just seeing ourselves as a race or allowing the dominant side to say, well, you're Black. No, Black is just a misnomer. We come from, regardless of if we know or remember, we all still come from tribes and nations. Just because you were brought in here on a boat and you were separated, half of you died on the ship, and then even your own family members were sold either in front of your face as well as some of your children and renamed, does not mean you still did not come from a tribe. You still came from a tribe, you still came from a nation. You just don't maybe know which ones they were. We did not just hatch out of egg and everybody else came from other nations. No, we came from nations too. But because of slavery, now, we have a problem with that identity. But in order for us to bridge that gap, We got to look at it this way. Our history starts here in America. Our history starts in the soil of this country. Our blood is in the soil of this country. Our ancestors are in the blood of these fields. We were the original stock trade in this country. And the reason why this country has been able to acquire the GDP is because of slavery. That is a historical fact, whether you want to accept it or not. And the 14th Amendment in this country says we pay our debts, right? The American debt will not be questioned. Well, there's definitely a debt that's owed to foundational Black Americans, whether you want to accept it or not. This is not me lobbying for a check. This is just a historical fact. And the idea that they say nobody should get reparations, well, people are getting reparations right now. They can call it something different, but in function, that's exactly what it is. You're doing it to make them whole. You're not giving Native Americans land and money because you just want to be nice to them. And you know it. But you know what the sad part about it is? One of the reasons why I think that they were willing to go along with it is because they knew that they had some $5 items in there that they wanted to funnel some of that money to. I hate to say it, but in all reality, I think that had a bit to do with it. Was there was some white influence in there inside Native American tribes. And since a lot of these Native American tribes, actually, some of them actually owned slaves, or at least some Native Americans actually did, and it was easy enough to say, hey, look, we're going to deny these Black Native Americans, because look, there's a lot of Black people that were also Native Americans that were denied benefits because they were the Black Native Americans. Okay? They've been getting reparations in this country since the late 1600s. No, excuse me, the late 1800s. At least since the late 1800s. So the reality is that, we got to start looking at the truth. Because anything that's missing is a lie by omission. By omitting part of history, it still basically makes it a lie. So those lies are always going to rise to the top, because when you're looking to solve problems, when you decide not to acknowledge the entire problem, you can't solve the problem. And by trying to tell some people or back them down or bully them down or finger wag them to say, you should just take what we give you and shut the F up, no, it's not quite right. That's not quite right. And as human beings, regardless who wants to accept it or not, we deserve the respect that we demand, whether some people want to give it to us or not. Because at the end of the day, we get to define who we are. No one else does. And we should demand respect to be acknowledged as what we are, not what someone else wants you to be. If they want to do that to you, they're not your friend, and they don't respect you. And they don't see you the same. They don't see you as an equal. You know what? You may have to deal with those people in business, but don't deal with them in your personal life. Because obviously, they basically told you that they are adverse to you having an identity. That's racist. No matter how you slice it. Anyway, it's Black Bushido, and I'm out.